We're going to kind of ask a question about why did Catholicism fail like this? What was the cause of it? Why did they go so bad and so early into all of these things that we've been talking about now and all the other things you know? And so I submit, I've talked about this a bit before in other lessons, that the problem here was really Roman arrogance. The Romans were the greatest power on earth. They had a country that had great technology. They were the superpower of their time, and they had buildings and monuments and aqueducts and statues and all sorts of things like that that they were able to build. And I saw endless, endless tons of that. And so because of those things, being a superpower and having all this great technology for their time, they thought that they were great people, and it just made sense for them. It was a natural way for them to think that this greatness needed to be part of Christianity. And so what probably without even intending to, they tended to shape Christianity to look like themselves. And that really shouldn't be a surprise, because that's been a failing for so many churches, is that there's somebody who's the leader of the church who makes the church look like himself, and he thinks that he's a fine person and should be the person that the church is, that he's creating, should be modeled after. And so no surprise there, but nonetheless, I believe that is what really caused it, is Roman arrogance from being the superpower of their time and having all of that stuff. And so that bled into Christianity. And we're going to talk about some of those things that did bleed into Christianity that we can identify. And we know that the Romans were polytheistic before that. They had this system of Jupiter, who is the Roman version of Zeus in the Greek system, and lots of other gods and demigods and things like that. And so that was the religion that the Romans came from before they adopted Christianity. And some of those things mixed in to Christianity, and other things from other religions mixed in. And they loved the greatness. That was a theme that I kind of heard from our guides over and over, is a great God should have great buildings and great monuments. That just makes sense to them. But that's not our God at all. That's not the God depicted in the Bible. And so this greatness that they loved also leaked in, and great buildings. Boy, I've seen buildings, um, and and um, and they're abominations to God, I believe. So nonetheless, they loved all these great things, these great buildings, and they felt that a great God should have all of these things. And they had a strong political system in Rome. That was really one of their power sources, is that they were a well-organized country. They had a good political system, and they were able to control a massive area of the earth. The whole Roman Empire was so huge and it was still ruled from Rome, a city in Italia. So they also had a strong military, and so this bled into Christianity as well, in the form of Christian crusades. The Christian church had crusaders who went out and attacked other countries and conquered other countries and slaughtered people. So these things that were part of the life of Rome bled into the Christian churches, and in ways that they should never have happened. And partly because there wasn't anybody to say no. Anybody who tried to say no to them was kicked out, and so there was never a voice in the church that could say no, you're way off. But even within the early Roman church, they recognized that statues were wrong, and they said, our church will never have statues in it. God doesn't want that. That would be an abomination to God. But now that's what you see just littered all over the churches, inside and out, and we'll see pictures. So nonetheless, despite a few voices raising questions about what they were doing, they pushed on ahead and did these things. Um, so there's really nothing new, as I said, about mixing the world into the church. That's happened in so many different ways. It's something that we ourselves need to watch for. We all have ideas about things and ideas about how things should be. And sometimes we can think, well, the Bible must work this way because it just makes so much sense to me. And so we can fail by letting these ideas of ourselves get in, even though they aren't supported in the Bible. And if we do that, we're failing to limit ourselves to what the Bible says. And so that's often the case, is the Bible doesn't speak on every topic, or doesn't speak obviously on every topic. And so sometimes people will slip in things in those little corners where the Bible doesn't seem to be speaking about anything. And one of those is the immense buildings of the Catholic Church. The Bible does talk about that, and it talks about if you if you do these things, you're creating an abomination to God, and God's not interested in it. What you're creating is something of mankind made by the hands of man that you are now worshiping. And so we can fall into the same failure ourselves. It's a common thing, yeah, easy for people to do, and it happens in our time as well. But the Catholic Church was probably worse than anybody. They were absolutely unable to keep anything out of Christianity, and that has continued into the present. As they spread out into Polynesian islands and stuff like that, they started picking up junk from the Polynesian churches and bring it into Christianity, or at least the Polynesian version of the Christianity. And the reason is, I think, that when you start dropping your standards, when you start to say, well, we're going to accept idols in our church because they're not really idols, they're just ways for people to learn and understand the Bible better. When you drop your standards like that and give an excuse for that, then you can't stop anything. Any other idol or image like that, a person can say, well, you've got these, why can't you have ours? Well, okay, we'll have yours. And so you let everything in as soon as you start dropping your standards, and you just can't stop dropping your standards. It keeps on and on. And that does seem to be the case with the Catholic Church at many times in history. So an example of that is one place in Florence, Italy. This is not the Vatican. This is Florence, and this is a cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, and Fiore is flower, so Santa Maria of flowers. And this is kind of central Florence. It's right in the middle. There's a business district around it, and this massively ornate building. And I'll show you some other pictures to try and to show you. But there's something in particular I want to point out here. See along this line here. I don't know if you can see well enough in your pictures, but what you've got here is 3 statues here, another 3 here, something in the middle, 3 more here, and 3 more here. And what this is, you're seeing the 12 apostles and something up here. And so I have a camera that zooms in 3 times, so I zoomed in to get a better picture of that, and I'll show that to you in just a moment. And so we can get a better view of that. But you can see for scale that this is a monstrous church from the front view, but the side view is actually bigger. This is the side view, and it continues on. It's at least 2 or 3 times longer than it is wide at the front. And this building is part of it, and this building is part of it as well. And there's a 3rd building on the other side that isn't part of it, but kind of looks like these, but it's still part of the same church complex. Oh, and back on the previous slide, I didn't point out that there was a tower on the right-hand side that's separated from the church, but it's also part of that same complex. And by looking at the people here, you can kind of get a bit of scale. You can see, let's say that was a 5-foot person. So this doorway here is like 20 feet high, and probably the building is a total of 100 feet high. Massive, ornate. This green stuff here is a special kind of granite that is green and very expensive and rare, and it's made out of piles of that. So this is the immense, ornate churches that you see everywhere in Italy. This is better than some, but it's not the best by any means. And what I wanted you to see, though, is this picture here. This is the zoomed-in picture I talked about. So what you're seeing here is 6 of the apostles. And the Catholic Church has decided what all these people look like, and they're carrying things or doing things in all of these little statues that indicate who they are. So if you studied Catholicism, you would be able to identify which one is which. But the problem here is this central figure. You would think the center stone, the cornerstone, would be Jesus. Why wouldn't you see Jesus there? No, you see Mary with a baby Jesus. Now that's just like Christmas, and so the real problem here is that this isn't a biblical idea. Mary was a nobody in the church, and because they had been so used to having goddesses in the religion that they came from, they wanted a goddess, and they created a goddess. And so they took Mary, who was a humble woman, and created her to be a goddess, just like Jesus was a god, and continued on from there. And all of that exists today. So what we see in all of that is the ideas from this Jupiter Zeus religion leaking in. Polytheism did leak in, but the Roman Church says, no, we believe in a single God. But when you see that up there, you can see what really looks like to anybody as multiple gods. You've got the apostles as demigods, and you've got the goddess Mary, and you've got the god Jesus, And so you really have polytheism, although the Catholic Church would say, no, that's not polytheism, but it really is. And like I said, goddesses, Mary is now a goddess in there. Jesus is secondary and only a child. And that's part of the problem that we have with Christmas is it depicts Jesus as just a child. He didn't come to earth to be a child. He came to be our Savior and to die as a man on a cross. And he didn't come to be a child. That was just a phase he grew through. And so what we also see from the Jupiter Zeus religion is that all of those gods had roles. There were gods like Mercury and Mars and things like that, and each of them had a particular role, a function that he had. And the apostles in Catholicism have the exact same thing. Each one of them is a patron saint of something. So the apostle Mark is the patron saint of barristers. So lawyers are kind of his thing. And he's also the patron saint of various cities. So Venice in Italy, Egypt, Copts, various places like that. He's the patron saint of those places. And so just like in the polytheist Roman religion, where all of the gods had a function, something they were in charge of, here the apostles are also in charge of something, as though somehow they could still be affecting things. And you also see statues of the gods. All over these cities, you see statues of the old gods and depicted because they were carved long, long ago. And you see statues of the gods on this church, and you would see them in the church too. And that comes from stuff leaking in because God made it pretty obvious that one of the commandments says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not worship any graven image." And so any carved image, even in the most literal translation, but we know that it means more than just carved images. And nonetheless, that's what they have, is they've got statues of the gods of their religion all over the place. So all of these things leaked in, and very quickly, to be honest, into the Catholic Church. And as I said before, we can fail in the same way. We can leak in our desires and our ideas into Christianity. What seems right and just to a man is not what God thinks of as right and just. We fail if we ever try to go out on our own and decide what God would want. And there are churches based on these very failed ideas. Somebody had an idea that made sense to them and they couldn't change it into a church. And so the charismatic churches like that, the Mormon church especially, and there are prosperity gospels and social gospels and all sorts of other things that travel around in the churches. And so this isn't anything new that the Catholic Church has done. They've just probably done it on a bigger scale because they had more time to do it. So that's the failure of Catholicism. Any questions on that one?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Sure.
When I was a Baptist way back when, I asked the pastor, how come we were doing Easter, going to church Sunday, and all these other things? And he goes, well, we just do it now. We did it because of the Catholic Church, but now we're doing it for ourselves. That doesn't make any sense to me, but
No.
That's the way they were thinking.
Yeah, and their words say it. They recognize that the problem is, but now they say, well, no, we're not doing it for the Catholic Church. We're doing it for ourselves. But well, it was the Catholic Church that started it, and you're doing it because they started it. So you might try to separate yourself from what has happened, but you can't.